Good day, everyone. Today we're going to learn about how to construct true or false test items. Now, what is a true or false test type of test? Well, let's talk about the true or false test items. True or false items are items of the test wherein the students are to indicate in some manner whether the statement that is being presented in the test is true or false. Now, the advantage of having this type of test is that this can be written quickly. So you can prepare this very quickly, unlike the other types of tests. True or false require the students to select a response that shows recognition of the correct or incorrect information that is presented to them. So you have to make sure that the information that you present to them is absolutely true or absolutely false, so that there will be no debates later on as to which is the correct answer. Now, true or false items are also called forced choice because the students must choose between two possible answers. So in true or false, there are only two options. One is true, the other is false. So students will be forced to choose between the two alternatives for them to respond to the question being asked in every item. It is also good for assessing the student's knowledge level content, evaluating student understanding of popular misconceptions and concepts with two logical responses. So what are the two logical responses in a true or false items? So it's either true or false, but again, you have to make sure that the information you presented is something that is either absolutely true or absolutely false. So when you are going to work on a true or false test item, put in mind that the level that you are assessing is on understanding, on knowledge or remembering. So these are all under lower order thinking skills. But if you're going to construct it properly, you can gauge whether the students have understanding of on the concept that you have introduced. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages when you're going to use true or false items to assess the learning of your students. One is that, as what I mentioned, this is not time consuming in preparation, and that teachers can test a large amounts of content with the use of this type of test. And that because also the true or false test items can make the students answer 3 to 4 questions per minute. So there would be a lot of test items that you can include, and it can probably cover a lot of competencies that you need to test for as long as the test items are actually checking on the knowledge and understanding skills of the students. What are the disadvantages? One is that they are easy. They are easy because they have only uh, two options, and that the probability of getting high or correct answer is high. And that it's difficult whenever you use this test type is that it's difficult to discriminate between students that know the material and students who do not, because there are some items which are actually responded by the students correctly, but we are not so sure whether they have understood the lesson. And this has a high probability to guessing of the students. So what is the probability? The chance of getting the right answer by the students through guessing is 50-50. So there's a 50% probability for the students to get the correct answer through guessing. And for us to be able to establish the reliability or high reliability of true or false test items, we need a large number of items. So it's good that we can test a large amounts of content and that students will be able to respond to it in a very limited period of time. But of course, we need to make sure that when we have true or false test items, it can yield a high reliability index, and we can only do that, or we can only have that when we have a large number of items. Now, what are the guidelines in constructing true or false items? I'll just move this one so you can probably check on it. All right, so here at the bottom. All right, so the first rule is that you have to base true or false items upon statements that are absolutely true or false without qualifications or exceptions. So make sure that the statement that you are presenting is absolutely correct or absolutely incorrect, so that there was, as what I mentioned a while ago, there would be no debates, and there would be no qualifications and arguments after checking the test. So for example, there's a question about nearsightedness, and that the first statement, which is labeled as undesirable, is telling that nearsightedness is heredity in origin. But take note that there are some factors that might facilitate or enable nearsightedness of individuals or human beings. So if we want to make this absolutely true, so we can probably improve the test item by stating this way. Genetics and eye specialists believe that the predisposition to nearsightedness is hereditary. Let's move on to second rule. Rule number 2. Express the item statement as simply, as clearly as possible. So avoid awkward arrangement of words when you're going to state something. So what you need to do is that you have to keep in mind that when stating statement in true or false test items, it has to be simple and it has to be clear. So let's take a look at this example. So the example here is, when you see a highway with a marker that reads Interstate 80, you know that the construction and upkeep of that road is maintained by the state and federal government. So that's undesirable because there is a confusion that it will result to when the students, or among the students, when this statement is going to be read by the students. So to make it simple, we can revise that statement and state the item this way. The construction and maintenance of interstate highways are provided by both state and the federal government. So this is more clear compared to the first statement, because the first statement will probably yield confusion among the students. Now, let's move on to rule number 3. For rule number 3, express a single idea in each item. So meaning to say, you don't have to put many ideas in one item. As remember, we are supposed to be stating absolutely correct or absolutely incorrect information. So let's look at this example. We label this undesirable because there are two ideas or two or more ideas in the first statement. Like the item is stated this way: water will boil at a higher temperature if the atmospheric pressure on its surface is increased and then more heat is applied to the container. So there's already there are actually two ideas when you are going to apply more heat, and that when you are going to look at also the atmospheric pressure by checking on its temperature. So we can probably simplify and that state a single idea only and improve that particular statement by stating this way: water will boil at a higher temperature if the atmospheric pressure on its surface is increased. So there's only single idea, unlike the first one. The first in the undesirable statement, or in the statement labeled undesirable, there is still an application of it which would probably confuse the students. Now, let's move on to rule number 4. Include enough background information and qualifications so that the ability to respond correctly to the items does not depend on some special, and common knowledge. So let's look at the undesirable statement. The second principle of education is that the individual gathers knowledge. So take note that there could be an argument to that. Others would believe that the individual will not only be the one to gather knowledge, and that for you to be able to make it absolutely correct, you have to put a reference. You have to put background information. So who mentioned that statement? So we can state that item so that it will be desirable this way. According to John Dewey, the second principle of education is that the individual gathers knowledge. So there would be no debates because that was really mentioned by John Dewey. Now let's move on to rule number 5. Avoid the extreme use of avoid the use of extreme modifiers or qualifiers. So if you try to look at the statements, there are modifiers. So for the first statement, there is a modifier all. For the second statement, there's a modifier frequently. And for the third statement, there is a modifier generally. So for you to be able to come up with very good true or false items, you can probably say for the first statement, sessions of the Congress are called by the President. The Supreme Court rules on the constitutionality of the law. An objective test is easier to score than essay test. So that can make it more simple, and that it is absolute in terms of its correctness or incorrectness. Now, let's move on to rule number 6. Avoid lifting statements from the text, lecture, or other material so that memory alone will not permit a correct answer. So if you really want the understanding of the students on the topic, you should make sure that you are not lifting the items in your true or false test type from the textbook or from the PowerPoint presentation or from the handouts of the students. So you can probably give example if that's a law, or you can probably paraphrase some of the words so that students' understanding will really be measured. So for example, this is the third law of Newton. For every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction. So instead of stating that, which is obviously lifted from the lecture or even from the book or even from the text, we can probably give an example for the students to check whether that example is telling about the third law of Newton. So we can state this way. If you were to stand in a canoe and throw a life jacket forward to another canoe, chances are your canoe would jerk backward. So that probably would tell whether the students really have understood the lesson on the laws of Newton. Now, let's move on to rule number 7. Avoid using negatively stated item statements. So just like the multiple choice, we are to avoid the use of negative words or the double negatives, of course. So for example, in this statement, the Supreme Court is not composed of 9 justices. So instead of putting the not, because that might confuse the students, it's not probably that they got the correct answer because the incorrect answer because they don't understand, but because they were confused of, or they might overlook the not in the statement. So instead of putting the not, we can remove the not and simply state the statement. The Supreme Court is composed of 9 justices. Now, rule number 8, you have to avoid the use of unfamiliar vocabulary. So for this, the undesirable statement, raison d'etre is something that would not be familiar to the students, and that um, you are not supposed to be putting that on the statement. So instead of um, stating your item this way, according to some politicians, the raison d'etre for capital punishment is retribution. You can improve it by saying or stating, according to politicians, justification for capital punishment is retribution. And those are the 8 guidelines for constructing true or false items. Additional, you don't have to come up with a set of true or false items with answers that are in patterns. So remember that when you're going to make use of true or false items, it has to be absolutely correct or absolutely incorrect, and that for you to be able to yield high reliability, you have to produce a more number of items. So thank you for listening, and I hope you learned from this